It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160. Our conversation with Tom Clavin, the author of Follow Me to Tom. I can't say this word because I'm a nice young man. Tell me the name of your book.
Follow Me to Heck.
Oh, there you go.
Follow Me to Hell.
Follow Me to Heck. I like that. McNelly's Texas Rangers and the Rise of Frontier Justice. This conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack. Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people, voted best personal injury law firm in Indiana County, in the Best of Indiana County 2022 edition. Tom, good morning to you. It's another wonderful ride through the West with you, isn't it?
It is. And it's funny you should mention that right off the bat, because this book, Follow Me to Hell, represents my return to the American West. My last book on that was Tombstone, which came out in April 2020. So it's been 3 years, and it's not like I've been idle. It's just that other projects where I was working on did not have to do with the American West. And so this has been, I'm very enjoying coming back to a topic that's rooted right in the middle of the American West, especially in Texas.
Well, we were traipsing through Europe with you just a couple of months ago in World War II.
Yes.
And now we're down in Texas and actually crossing over into Mexico from time to time with a gentleman by the name of Leander McNelly. What a fascinating guy, and the stories that are told about him and the Texas Rangers as a whole. And that's probably a good place to start, the Texas Rangers as a whole, because you spend a really, really good portion outlining what could probably be 6 or 7 other books with the history of the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, I had to sort of walk a fine line because the 2023 is the bicentennial of the Texas Rangers, and that to me was quite remarkable that you have a law enforcement agency that's been around for 200 years. That's like a century more than the FBI, for example. And so, but I didn't want to do a textbooky kind of history of the Texas Rangers, and they're very good people who could do that much better than I can. But I wanted to, in order to get to the real meat of the story, which is Leander McNelly and his company of Texas Rangers, I needed to give some background. I mean, who were they? How were the Rangers founded by Stephen Austin in 1823? What were the early days of the Rangers like, and who were some of the great captains along the way, like Sam Walker, who was known for the Walker Colt gun, John Coffey Hayes, Rip Ford. There's a lot of fascinating individuals and stories that lead up to when we are first introduced to Leander McNelly in the Civil War. So really, I didn't want to do a history book, but inevitably there had to be some history there to set the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find out very quickly that Texas was basically writing its own law at the time and deciding just what society would let people get away with. And sometimes it was, you talk about blurred lines, there certainly were those.
There were, and that's where the idea of the subtitle "Frontier Justice" comes in, because there was, Texas has there are other states, of course, that border with other countries. You have Arizona, New Mexico, and then up north you have Minnesota, Montana, the border with Canada. But Texas is unique as the sheer length of its border with Mexico, and that's an issue today, and it was an issue in 1823 when the Texas Rangers were founded. And for those 200 years, border protection and border patrol have been the responsibility of the Texas Rangers. So I didn't really intend it this way, but when I was writing Follow Me to Hell, I saw parallels between some of the lawlessness that was going on in Texas in the 1860s and 1870s, and what we're trying to fight today. Whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, I think most people will agree that Texas as confronts because of the sheer size of their border, confronts a lot of the issues involving illegal immigration.
Yeah, absolutely does. And so we meet finally Leander McNelly in this book. He's a tiny little guy, but man, he's like the bantamweight that won't let loose. He sort of gets his teeth into something and won't let go of it, will he?
That's a good analogy. He does fight above his class. He had bantamweight, and he fights like a welterweight. Yeah, even one of his admirers described him as puny. Now, I should point out that Leander McNelly had the misfortune of contracting tuberculosis when he was a young adolescent. And so in those days especially, that was a death sentence. It meant, it certainly guaranteed you would not have a long life, and it also, in most cases, meant that you would not be a very robust individual, and McNelly was not. He was 5'5", thin, always afflicted by the symptoms of tuberculosis, but it was a great act of courage for him to get into his horse every morning and lead his men. And I think that was one of the reasons why they followed him so loyally, because they could see the toll it took on him to be the leader. And why would they be slackers when they saw somebody who was willing to put the work and the effort in with such challenges?
One of the things that really strikes me about the book is trying to get inside of him and find out what was driving him to be the kind of guy that he was. He had the farm life, and he could have settled down and been a farmer, but that wasn't enough for him. And to see what his motivations were for the amazing acts of bravery and sometimes foolishness in leading the attacks that he did in order to bring justice. What drove the guy?
I think to some extent, his illness was responsible in a couple of ways. One was that in battle, he did have a fearlessness that was inspirational to the men who followed him. And I think part of that was because he knew he was not going to have a long life anyway. So he'd much rather, if a bullet found him, that was the way to go rather than to die, from the illness, finally succumbing to the illness. I think another thing, too, is because he only lived to be 33 years old, and I think he didn't know necessarily what age he would be when he died, but he knew it would not be an old one. I think he wanted to pack as much life into his life as possible. As you mentioned, especially after the Civil War, after serving 4 years in the Civil War, he came back to Texas, got married. He was a farmer. His wife were raising 2 children, and he could have stayed there for the rest of his life, however long that was. But knowing that his lifespan was not going to be a long one, that was a little too boring for him. That didn't contain enough adventure for him. So that's why when the Texas state government reached out and asked him to join their humble law enforcement agency, he said yes, he would do it. And he left his farm behind and embarked on a whole other career.
Working along the border in adventure after adventure, Leander McNelly, just his personality shines through. There was a point at this one particular juncture where he's there along the border working on behalf of the Texas Rangers, but really on behalf of the United States government. And he sends back a reply to a note to him, to orders given to him. And he was told to return to Texas. And his reply from near Las Cuevas, Mexico, in 1875, I shall remain in Mexico with my Rangers and cross back at my discretion. Give my compliments to the Secretary of War. Tell him and his United States soldiers to go to hell. Signed, Lee H. McNelly, commanding.
Yeah.
What a personality.
What a personality. And I should point out that particular moment is when he's been confronted by hundreds of Mexican troops, and he and his 26 men are on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande, not the American side. So it's not like he's thumbing his nose from safety across the river at the Mexican troops. They are pitted down on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande with hundreds of troops that outnumber 10, 15, or 20 to 1. And so it's a moment of great defiance, and you used the word foolishness before, probably foolishness, because he seemingly condemns himself and his men to death. I don't want to give away what happens, but that's the kind of personality he was. He had a problem with authority, and that's interesting because he expected that his orders would be followed to the letter, but he didn't feel that quite that same way when it came to following other people's orders.
Yeah, Leander McNelly's personality is such that his men are fiercely loyal to him, and they'll follow him anywhere, including where he tells them to follow him as they ride into Mexico. It is just a fascinating story, and his very, very short life was as jam-packed with adventure as you could possibly hope to have. The Leander McNelly story is one, Tom, that we don't know a lot about until you favor us with this story. And there are plenty of guys just like him in the history of the Texas Rangers.
There are, and that was part of the reason why I felt it was so necessary to give background on the Texas Rangers, because there are people like John Coffey Hayes and Rip Ford and others, John B. Jones, who were really kind of dynamic and very active Texas Ranger captains who were involved in all kinds of engagements, including, in some cases, the Alamo itself, the Texas Revolution, and the Mexican-American War. So, yes, Leander McNelly is my main character, and I think he's a fascinating one. But people who read Follow Me to Hell are going to get a compendium of characters and their adventures, some of which turned out tragically, some of which were very successful. So you're getting quite an overview of what consisted of the Texas Rangers and the fascinating people that were in those ranks.
Yeah. The epilogue begins with a quote from Texas Monthly. Says, courageous and gentlemanly, utterly devoted to his men and his mission, a remorseless killer and dead himself by the holy age of 33. From McNelly flows the rich blood of Ranger lore. You probably could not have chosen someone to more exemplify what the Texas Rangers were about in their infancy and sort of as their legacy.
Well, McNelly was a very pleasant surprise for me because I had not heard of him before I started doing some research into the Texas Rangers. But one of the things that impressed me was how, even though he had a short career and a short life, he is revered in Texas Ranger history. And in fact, when they set up their first class of their first Hall of Fame, McNelly was a unanimous choice to be part of it. So he is one of those gems that you find if you dig deep enough, you're going to find a gem there. And I think I did that with Leander McNelly. He's a fascinating character.
Well, one of the one of my favorite Broadway plays is Sunday in the Park with George, where Surratt is asked if he's working on something new, and he says no because there are no more stories to tell. Tom Clavin, I hope you've got plenty more stories to tell because you've hit on another rich one here.
Thank you very much. And yes, there are more stories to tell.
We look forward to them. Tom, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.